Hi guys, it's Erica. Listen, I just wanted to pop on here really quickly and remind you to stay tuned until the end of the video where we go over the giveaway and all the details. It's giveaway time again. So stay tuned until the end and enjoy the video. Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are here to discuss the Artistry Palette. It's a brand new collaboration from Morphe and James Charles. They got together and they created a palette, and we're going to talk about that today. So if that is something you're interested in watching, then you are in the right place. We're about to get into it.
I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf.
Alright guys, so the Artistry Palette. This is a collaboration between James Charles and Morphe. It's basically a version of a palette that was released last year around Christmas time, except this one has all brand new colors, brand new formulations in it, and it was created by an influencer named James Charles. Now, there has been a lot of controversy out there surrounding this particular palette, and I'm going to try and break that down for you as quickly and simply and cohesively as I can. So let's talk about the controversy that's surrounding this palette. Basically, it comes down to a customer had an experience and video recorded her statement about this experience with this palette, and she posted it online. Now, she's also an influencer. She has her own channel with her own type of videos that she uploads. So she's, established on the internet, and she had this experience with this palette where her lids were stained. She also claimed that she had some breakout going on, and then you know how the internet is, it just kind of turned into a pile-on. Several other people came out and said that they had staining on the eyes, and the big complaint, and her complaint that she voiced on Twitter, was basically that she felt as though if this product was going to do this, that James Charles or Morphe or someone should have stated that in the beginning. Now, James Charles, when he first introduced this palette, he came out and he did explain that he found out through working with Morphe and creating this palette that there is a difference between eyeshadow and pressed pigment. He explained pressed pigment as pigment that is just pressed, and that pressed pigment is a little more difficult to work with as opposed to a regular eyeshadow formula that is basically eyeshadow is a whole bunch of ingredients mixed together, and that's what an eyeshadow is, and that's the difference between a pressed pigment and an eyeshadow. And then he basically said, in his response to the concern that this lady expressed, his Twitter basically stated, and I want to make sure I get this right, most pinks, purples, and reds all stain certain skin types. This is common knowledge to all makeup lovers. You accusing me of lying to fans and not caring about people is a ridiculous cry for attention. If you have hives, consult your dermatologist, not me, for likes on Twitter. So that was James's response to this lady having a concern about what she was seeing on her eyes. So let's break this down and actually get to what it is that's going on. So first of all, what James is talking about in his palette is that there is pressed pigment in this palette. There's also eyeshadows that are in this palette. So it's a little bit of a blend of both. And pressed pigments, this is where James is wrong. Pressed pigments are not just pigment pressed. That's not correct. If that was correct, when you look at the ingredients on the back of the eyeshadow palette, for the shades that are only pressed pigments, you should only see one ingredient. and that should be the pigment. And that's not what you see. You see the ingredient that is the pigment probably towards the front, as there is a huge amount of pigment in pressed pigments. However, it does contain a lot of other ingredients, just like an eyeshadow. However, with pressed pigments, I will say that that concoction is mostly pigment. But to say that it's just pigment pressed, number one, is just wrong. One thing that he was correct about is that pressed pigments are usually a little more difficult to work with. He did say that in the video where he was talking about the palette. He did say that pressed pigments oftentimes can be a little more difficult to work with. And in that, he is correct. It does take a little bit more finesse to work with a pressed pigment. It's very similar to like the ABH palettes. They're not like a normal palette. You guys, if you are a makeup lover, are probably very familiar with what the difference is in a regular eyeshadow and something that is a pressed pigment. Having said that, nowhere in his introduction video did James Charles say what he should have said in regards to his pressed pigment formula that Morphe has. And I'll give you a great example of how this should have been done. And that's the way that Jeffree Star explained his pressed pigments and his vegan formula in the Blood Sugar palette. He clearly stated this was a pressed pigment palette, and when you use a vegan formula, reds, pinks, purples, those colors that are very hard to perfect, if you want a smooth, creamy matte and you want the pigment to be off the chain, then you have to use red dyes, because if you're vegan, then you can't use carmine. So a lot of those dyes can stain the eye area. So on the back of the box, the unit carton that came with this, it says that you cannot use these pigments around the eye area. And the way he explained it was that if you have sensitive eyes, that these dyes may stain your eyes if you have sensitive eyes, and it may act as an irritant. And he said very clearly that I have to say this to you guys because it is a pressed pigment and the FDA has not approved those dyes for eye use. And it just is what it is. He was very honest about it. If you guys go back and watch the Blood Sugar launch video, he said those exact words. It was very, very clear. And not only did Jeffree Star do it, but so did Manny MUA when he talked about his Lunar Beauty palette. Now, he was a little less clear, but he did say because he wanted to create a vegan palette with no carmine in it, that he had to use dye in this particular palette. And so he had to call this not an eyeshadow palette, but a pressed pigment palette. And it also has the disclaimer on the back that says this can stain your skin and cause an irritant. Now, in his video, he just kind of brushed it off a little bit and said, you know, it's not really going to do anything. Urban Decay has the same warning on their palettes, which is true. There are several palettes out there that have the same warning. MAC Cosmetics has the same warning. Those red dyes have the potential to stain your eyes. Now, he went on to say, it's never happened to me. I've never had to deal with it, but I have to tell you legally that it could potentially. So while he was a little less clear than Jeffree Star, because Jeffree Star was very straight to the point in talking about this, he still talked about it. Manny MUA even talked about it, because it is something that is not approved by the FDA for eye use. These dyes that are used in place of carmine and other things that are animal byproducts. So if you want to stay vegan and cruelty-free, then you really are kind of boxed in to working with these dyes. Or if you want a pigment payoff that is very rich, you're going to get that from a good dye. So if you guys will remember, in James's introductory video about his palette, nowhere in that did he say those same words. Nowhere in that did he say this could stain your eyes and this could cause an irritant. Now, this is where the conundrum is. James said in his video that he recently learned what pressed pigments were. And that just shows me that there's a little bit of a lack of knowledge there. So James Charles himself genuinely may not have known, or pigments that are approved and safe for eye use, ones that are not. He honestly may not have known in order to say something. And if that's the case, then the onus falls on Morphe to be the one to say something. And at the end of the day, neither one of them did. Now, on the Lunar Beauty palette, the Life's a Drag palette, and on the Blood Sugar unit carton, there were disclaimers on the back that said the FTC has not approved these dyes for use around the eye area. They have to put that on there legally. It's a legal disclaimer. However, that is not anywhere on this unit carton. There is no disclaimer on this unit carton. There is no disclaimer on the palette itself. So there's still nothing on here that says this is not for use around the eye area, except for one small thing that I honestly had to like look twice just to even catch. And that is right here. I'm going to put it up in front of the camera so you guys can see how incredibly small it is. So down here you can see the ingredients. This is the ingredients for the eyeshadows. This is the ingredients for the pressed pigment. It's a lot of ingredients for just a pigment that's pressed, right? Anyway, so this is the ingredients list for the eyeshadows. This is the one for the pressed pigment. And they have one thing on here, which is what I think is their disclaimer. If you can see, I don't know if you guys are going to even be able to see this, but there is a picture of an eyeball here, and then this is the eyeshadow formula, and then down here in the pressed pigment formula, there's a picture of an eyeball in a circle with a cross out. So I guess that means this is okay for eyes, this is not okay for eyes. I have never in my life seen that used as a disclaimer for pressed pigments. I think that is silly. I just think it's silly. There should be a very clear disclaimer on the packaging that says that this package includes dyes that have not been approved by the FDA and could possibly be a skin irritant and could possibly dye the skin. It's very simple. Nobody cares as long as you're honest with people, so that people that do have very sensitive eye areas can make an educated decision. And if they make that decision and something goes awry, then at least you're not liable. Now, at the end of the day, James Charles genuinely may not be educated about these things. Morphe may not have educated him on all of this, so he may well have not known to say something. But if that was the case, then Morphe should have said something. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm directly coming at James Charles and saying that James Charles should have said something, because he genuinely may not have known. But either way, even if he didn't know, I still think that the tweet that he used in response to that young lady was a little harsh. I don't think that it was probably the best reaction. I think that the way that this has been handled so far is just not, it's just not a good look. It's just not a good look. But I do want you guys to know there are pressed pigments in this, just like the Blood Sugar palette, just like the Lunar Beauty palette, and some of these pigments are very strong. That's the price you pay for the payoff, and you could get staining on the eye. A couple of ways to avoid that is to use concealer before you put on the eyeshadow. Use a good primer before you apply the eyeshadow. Make sure that you're using an oil-based makeup remover. That helps a lot to take it off. Sometimes you can take it off and you'll have like this little pink tint to your skin. It just happens in the makeup world. But we can't, as creators, and James Charles as a creator, I think he was wrong in assuming that everybody knows this about pressed pigments. This is like our world. We live, eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff. But that's not your average consumer. They don't live their lives like that. So expecting them to have that kind of a level of education, I think, is probably wrong, and I think it's assuming too much. I don't think that your common, everyday person that's just looking to buy a nice eyeshadow palette probably knows knows all of this, and I never ever think that as a business you should ever assume that people know this. So, all right, that's my piece on it. I've said my piece on it. Let's get into the palette. Alright guys, now, having said all of that, and I know I was probably a little harsh on James and Morphe because I do feel like they need to be a lot clearer with the disclaimer, because that will kind of alleviate this whole like shit show that's taken place over the ingredients and what they're doing to people's eyes, etc. I do agree that that should be the case, but having said that, I do think that this is a very interesting, innovative, very creative palette. I'll go ahead and just tell you that up front. Also, I will tell you that I do feel like you should probably watch James Charles' introductory video to this particular palette, because he does go shade by shade and he does explain to you why certain formulations were created in this palette. I think if you were to just pick up this palette and just go into it blind, it might be a little bit more difficult to work with. And the reason that I say that, I'm just going to open it up. There's not going to be any kind of like big reveal at this point. I think everyone has probably seen this. So this is the outside. It says Morphe and James Charles in kind of this shimmer like lettering on here, while the rest of the palette is like a matte black. It is very sleek. It is very neat. It is very reminiscent to last year's palette. So this is last year's palette. It just has Morphe on it, and you know, it's just kind of empty on the front. And this is last year's layout. So this is the James Charles collab, so it was laid out the same way. Now, in his introductory video, he does explain certain things about all of these individual pans. There are certain pans in here that are genuinely pressed pigments, and he is right about pressed pigments. Those are better to work with in a specific way. You want, with a pressed pigment, you kind of want to pat the shade on, like really kind of pack it on, and then you want to lightly go in and like blend out the edges, if that makes sense. Some people like to pack it on in layers. Some people like to just put a bunch on and deal with all the fallout and then go in and kind of blend it out. So you'll figure it out however it is that's best for you to work with a pressed pigment. But he'll go through and kind of identify those for you. He'll also talk about colors like this color here, which is like a purpley color he created specifically to be a topper on like a black base or some kind of a darker base, because when you look at this color individually on its own, or when like I've played with this on its own on the eye, it's kind of underwhelming, and you wouldn't really know that unless you had watched his video and you knew what that pan was created for. So he really went in and created very specific uses for a lot of these different colors in here. And honestly, out of all of these, there's only like one or two that I was disappointed with. There is a shade called Brother in here, one of the blues that is a little patchy when you work with it. It's hard to really get a nice seamless color when you use that particular one. And the orange here, I would just use this as like a transition. It's really hard to get kind of a good dense orange here. It just kind of shows up faded, and it kind of blends away faded. But other than that, and I've pretty much, at some point in time, I think I've dipped into everything at least once so that I could speak intelligently to you guys. I think this is actually quite an amazing palette. The matte black is stunning. I love that the huge pans in the middle are pans that are like the most used colors for like your everyday type of stuff. So those are the shades that you get really big pans of. And then of course your matte white and your matte black are used often. And then you have all of these beautiful colors down here. You have some more kind of everyday warm colors, and then you have a lot of color up here at the top. So I think this was a very creative palette. I love the layout of it. I love the way that it looks. I think you have so much in here for such a thin, sleek palette. Let's go ahead and get into the close-ups, because I do want you guys to actually look at the close-ups, see the pans. I know you guys like the close-ups because it makes you guys feel like you can get a better feel for the palette. So let me do some close-ups for you so you guys can really take a look at it. Alright guys, so according to Morphe, they say the color never ends with this Morphe full spectrum palette of 39 dialed up, deeply pigmented shades with 4 rows of stunning color combos and 1 row of super sized shades. You'll be ready to take on any look you can dream up. So go on and go for it and don't hold back. And that is the PR statement from Morphe. And you know, again, 39 shades, it's retailing for $39. The value is really good for this particular palette, and it is a beautiful palette. It is kind of one of those one-shop stop palettes that if you're an artist, you can throw this in your kit and go. You have everything you need if somebody wants something very colorful and kind of avant-garde, or if somebody wants something a little more natural and a little more everyday. And I can honestly tell you, if you have last year's palette and this year's palette, then you have an amazing collection of eyeshadows. You have just about everything that you could ask for. Another thing that I want to talk to you guys about too, when you're working with pressed pigments, you really want to use an actual eye primer, or what they call a pigment primer. There are actual primers out there that are pigment primers. Now, you guys have seen me oftentimes when I do a look, you'll see me go onto my lid and put an additional primer on there. And a lot of times I'll do that if I'm working with a pigment or if I'm working with something that I really want to lock down to my lid. Because again, remember, when you're working with a pressed pigment, you really kind of want to pack that on to get that really good, crisp color payoff, and then you can kind of blend out the edges a little bit. But if you really want a good, vibrant pressed pigment to really stand out and stay on the lid for a significant amount of time, then you want to use an actual pigment primer or an eye primer. There are a couple that I actually work with that I feel like are the best, and they're actually pretty inexpensive, so I'll go over those with you guys now. The first one that I absolutely love is from NYX, and this is actually called their Pigment Primer. And this is a primer that's specifically formulated for pigment. I'll give you guys a close-up of the tube here. Now, this primer is fantastic. It is a very long-wearing formula that kind of locks your color in place. It helps prevents all of your favorite pigments from creasing, smudging, or fading. And this one is incredibly inexpensive. I think it retails for like $6 or $7, but it's really good. The next base is P. Louise base. Now, this is actually a really good base to use for eyeshadow. Nikki Tutorials uses this one quite often. It's a gorgeous base. Now, this is a UK-based company, but you can go ahead and order it. They do have international shipping. I think it's like $10. It's very inexpensive as well, but it's really good. Now, you can get the base in several different shades. So think of this as kind of like a concealer, but with a little more tackiness to it. So you can get a tone that will match your skin because they do have it in several shades, or you can get like a white if you just want like a white kind of blanked out base. So there's a couple of different options with this one. And last but not least, and you're probably going to be surprised by this, but this is really a great pigment primer, and that is the Bad Habit eyeshadow primer. This stuff is surprisingly amazing. $6, and it works very similar to the NYX primer. It is got a doe foot applicator. It's very creamy. It goes on. It helps a little bit with like discoloration on the lid, but I mean not very much. But what it does do is it really locks your pigment down and it keeps it from creasing, and it makes your color payoff very long lasting. So this is another great eye primer. So these three are fantastic when you're working with pigment. So I just wanted to make sure that I gave you guys some recommendations when it comes to pigment primers. Alright, so next we're going to get into some swatches. Now this is a 39 pan eyeshadow palette, so what I'm not going to do is swatch every single pan, but what I am going to do is take a couple of shades from each row just so that you guys can see what the swatches look like. Now I will tell you, because there are a lot of different formulas in here, I don't want anybody running around shocked with their hair on fire if you see that some swatches in here don't necessarily perform like a lot of other swatches that you've seen. because there are some different formulas in here, they may not swatch perfectly, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good product. Keep in mind, swatches only tell half of the story, no matter what palette you're talking about. So let's go ahead and get into some swatches. Alright guys, so here's the swatches. This is the first row, and the first one is Canvas. The second one is Ring Light, and that red is Rusted. Then we also have Halloween Wig is the very last one, which is beautiful. This is some from the second row. Punch Me, we have Sister. That red there, you're kidding, is amazing. And then Shook. And then we have like a brown that's called Benny on the end. I love that red. And then this is the big pan row. So this is Flashback. And then we have Face. And then a little bit of Code James. And then No Beans. And then the matte black is actually called Spooky. So that's some of the third row. And then some of the ones on the fourth row, we have Guac, and then we have Hello, and then we have Playground, and then we have Artistry, which is one of my favorites. I love that shade. And then we have a matte pink that's actually called Pinkity Drinkity. Some of my favorite shades are in this row. I love that color Artistry. And then out of the last row, we do have Escape and Single. We also have Cola and Acapella. And then we have Social Blade and Daddy. And those are some of my favorites from the bottom row. These are some of my overall favorites. That green color, Daddy, on the end is amazing. I love that color. I also love Boutique. And then you have Cape Cod. That other one, Hello, is that blue. And then Face, the highlighter color, which is gorgeous. Halloween, I love that color. That matte color next to it is Mary. You're kidding, that matte red, unbelievable. And that green with the gold shift there on the end, that's Guac. It's stunning. Absolutely stunning. And then the orange is Rusted. And these are some of my favorites from this palette. Now this color specifically is Artistry. This is the topper. And the blue sparkle that is in this purple is so pretty. Absolutely gorgeous and unique. Very original. Alright guys, so that was the swatches. Next, let's talk about application. Now I'm going to show you guys the look that I created on my eyes tonight, and it wasn't difficult. I didn't have a bad time with it. I personally can use makeup wipes and then use just an oil-based cleanser, and I've been able to take all of the looks that I've created with this palette off easily, but I don't have like overly sensitive eyes, so it hasn't been a problem for me. But that doesn't mean that if you have sensitive eyes that it may not be a problem for you when it comes to staining, depending on what pigment it is that you're using. Having said that, let's go through the application process, because I will say this, guys, the formula is beautiful. I enjoy working with it on my eyes. I love the look that I have on my eyes tonight. So let's look at the application. Alright, so I started basically with Canvas, which is just great for underneath your brow bone and it giving you kind of that good highlight look underneath your brow bone. It's a beautiful matte shade. I absolutely love it. I also used Mary in the crease. I think it's a beautiful transition color. It blends out beautifully. I didn't have any problems with Mary at all. No patchiness, no skipping. And honestly, guys, that's basically the story with the majority of these eyeshadows. It really is a beautiful palette. I did deepen the crease a little bit with Boutique, just to really kind of darken up that crease and give my crease a little bit of definition. I put it in my crease. I also went back and forth between Boutique and No Beans and kind of put a little bit of those two together to really darken up the outer portion of my lid. And then I took Sister, which is a beautiful shimmer shade. It's just absolutely stunning. And Sister is what I used in the center of my lid. Now, of course, I went in with a primer first and laid the primer down before I put Sister on top of it, because I do have a problem with shimmer shades typically fade on my lids, and that's because I have textured lids. So I have a lot of fine lines and wrinkles on my lids, and that causes shimmer shades oftentimes to just kind of get creased and wrinkly on my lids, and they fade very quickly. So I do use a primer to kind of get that spotlight right in the center. And then on the inner corner of my my lid, I used back and forth between Boutique and No Beans, and just really kept Sister right in the center of my lid. Now, I did use Boutique underneath right on the lash line, and then kind of buffed it out with Mary a little bit just to really get it buffed out, and then it was just a matter of adding liner and lashes for the finished look. And at the end of the day, I think it's a beautiful look. I've been able to create some really, really pretty looks with this palette. I think it's stunning. I really, really do like this palette. And not only are the shadows in this palette gorgeous, but there's even, I mean, a lot of these are kind of multi-use type of pans. So for example, there is a shade in here that's called Face, and it's one of the large pans here. And the reason he made this a large pan is because not only is it gorgeous on the lid, but it's also really pretty as a highlight, and it's just really gorgeous. Look at that. It's a beautiful highlight shade, and it really does look really, really pretty on as a highlight. And so he made a nice big pan specifically for that shade so that you can get a really pretty highlight. So it's very inventive. He thought about a lot of different things when creating this palette, all the way from making sure that there were nice everyday shades in here, all the way to those really colorful avant-garde type shades if you wanted to really get those creative juices flowing, making sure that the big pans included things that were actually useful, like a highlighter shade, the matte white and the matte black, and then the three kind of burnt warm shades here are like one of the top 3 used shades in like everyday looks, and probably the ones that people will dip in the most. So he put a lot of thought into this palette, and I love that. I think it really shows in this palette. This is going to be a palette that can be a one-stop shop for any makeup artist to just kind of put in their kit and go. And I think it's incredible that everybody has an opportunity to own it at home in their own collection, and it's only $39. And I'll be honest with you guys, I haven't always been the biggest fan of all things Morphe. There are some of their smaller palettes that I'm not a fan of, but I was incredibly excited about last year's palette that they released at Christmas time that was in this same format, and I loved the formula of that palette, and it's been one of my most reached for palettes. So when this one was coming out, I got really excited about it, and I'm really glad that I wasn't disappointed. And you guys know, if it was horrible, I would absolutely tell you, and it's really, really not. As a matter of fact, I enjoy it so much that I want to give one away to you guys. I want one of you to really, really enjoy playing with this palette and getting those artistic juices flowing. So what we're going to do, I know I said I wasn't going to do any giveaways in the month of November to save up for our Christmas kind of extravaganza that we have coming, but I really, really enjoyed this palette so much that I wanted one of you guys to have the opportunity to play with your inner artist. So I think this is going to be something that would be amazing for somebody to get your creative juices flowing, and I hope that whoever wins this really, really enjoys it. So between now and the end of this month, all you have to do is, number 1, like this video. Number 2, put in the comments a way for me to get in touch with you. And I always have to say, if you want me to just respond to the comment in the comment section, I can do that as a way to reach out to you. Just let me know that that's what you want me to do. You're also welcome to DM me on Instagram and say, hey, contact me here if I am the winner. So you're welcome to send me a DM on Instagram. I typically always respond to you guys. If you send me a DM, I'll make sure I put my Instagram handle here. It's just at Erica Approved. So send me a DM, however it is that you want to let me know how to reach you in the event that you are the winner. You can also just put down in your comment, hey, reach me at Instagram. This is my Instagram handle. Send me an email. This is my email. If you're not comfortable putting that information down in the comment section, then send me a DM on Instagram and give me your information and I'll contact you that way. But I need a way to contact you. So, number 1, like this video. Number 2, put a comment down below and let me know how to get in touch with you in the event that you are the winner. Number 3, you got to be a subscriber. And I can't tell you guys how many times people forget to do number 3. So while you're watching right now, just go ahead and hit the button and go ahead and subscribe, because you have to be a subscriber in order to win the palette. Towards the end of this month, we'll hop on here and we'll do a live stream and we'll announce the winner as always. Make sure that you're following me on Instagram, because that is where I will announce the date and the time of the video when it goes live for us to announce the winner. And I'll probably let you know in an upcoming video between now and the end of this month what day it will be on. But as far as getting the time, I always announce that on Instagram. So make sure that you guys are following me on Instagram so that you are up to speed on when we're going to go live and make the announcement of who it is that's going to win the Morphe James Charles palette. Now, of course, it's not this one. This one is mine. This one is been well loved. Yours is right here. This one is yours. And it's all nice and wrapped up. It's still in its bubble wrap. I'm not going to open it. We're going to keep this one all nice and sealed up for you guys. So, get your entries in. Make sure you're subscribed, like the video, put a comment down below, and let me know how to get in touch with you in the event that you are the winner. And that is all you have to do. Alright guys, so good luck to everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a long one, but we had a lot to discuss about this particular palette. As always, I hope everybody is very happy, and I hope you guys are all very healthy. And I will see you guys in the next video.